Okay, I want to look at, this is a continuation of Lecture 8. We're in Daniel chapter 7. And we're going to look at a couple of passages here that we just want to clear up before we move into Daniel chapter 8. So we're still in Daniel chapter 7. And we want to specifically look at verse 25. Daniel 7 verse 25. And he shall speak, now we're talking about the Antichrist, little horn, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints. And that idea of wearing out is continual persecution of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. Now, the activity of the Antichrist lasts for 84 months that he appears on earth. His reign begins when he makes a peace contract with Israel and the nations. Daniel 9:27 says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. Now the Hebrew word for week in Daniel 9:27 is Shabuah, a time period of 7 years or 84 months. In the midst of the week, or the Shabuah, after 42 months, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. See, his first item of business is to make peace with Israel, an agreement that he honors for 3.5 years. At that point, however, Russia begins its march southward to Israel to break the peace contract that the Antichrist originally made with Israel. Then Gog and Magog, or Russia, go up against the land of unwalled villages when Israel is at rest. And you see that in Ezekiel 38, verse 11. Now, we have a good commentary on what these times mean. I told you that the Hebrew word Shabuah is a time period of 7 years. But I want you to back up with me, please, to Daniel 4, verse 25. Daniel 4, verse 25. Now we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar. We're talking him living like a beast out in the wilderness for 7 years. That they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven, and, now watch this, and 7 times, and we know it's 7 years, shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. Now, the word time means 1 year. The word times, T-I-M-E-S, means 2 years. The words dividing of time means 1/2 a year. So 1 plus 2 plus 1.5 equals, you got it, 3.5 years. These 3.5 years correspond exactly to Daniel 12, verse 7. They correspond exactly to Revelation 11:2. Turn with me, Revelation 11:2. Revelation 11:2 says, but the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. Turn with me to Revelation 13, verse 5. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. We're talking about the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation, the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period. Now, if you turn to Revelation 11, verse 3, It says, "And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy." And a lot of people question who the 2 witnesses are. Some say Elijah and Moses. Some say Enoch and Moses. And you got to work that thing out for yourself. I believe it's Elijah and Moses. "And I will give thee power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth." So those 42 months correspond exactly to that. And you go to Revelation chapter 12, verse 6. "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared for God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days." 42 months, 3.5 years, 3.5 years, 3.5 years, over and over and over again. It is the last half of the 70th week in Daniel 9, verses 24 to 27. Daniel 9, 24 to 27. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with the flood. Unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. And he shall confirm, now here it is, he shall confirm the covenant with many. This is the Antichrist, for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, in the midst of the 7 years, right in the middle of it, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. That's when he declares himself to be God, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Now our Lord spoke about that period in Matthew 24, verse 15. Matthew 24, verse 15. "When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return to take his clothes." And then it goes on and on. "Woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days." So, time is 1 year, times is 2 years, dividing of time is a half a year. So, 3.5 years. Now we know that since she became a nation in 1948, 50 years ago, in fact they just celebrated over there in Israel 50 years of Israel being a nation, Israel has neither been at rest nor at peace. And you need to open your eyes to this. I mean, if you haven't seen it, and I'm sure you have, all they're talking about is the peace process, and we're sending ambassadors over there, and we're trying to get things. And this especially has been very, very prominent since the 1970s when Jimmy Carter was over there trying to get peace. And it's just never happened. It's just never happened. They get peace for a short while, and then it breaks. Soon, sometime in the future, a peace program of 7 years duration will be contracted. Now that's going to be appealing. I mean, Israelis have been being killed. Palestinians, who are the descendants of the Philistines, have been getting killed. This is going to be appealing. I mean, nobody wants to live in a place where it's not safe to walk outside, where you have to worry about a stray bullet hitting your child while he or she is playing on the street. So there's going to be a peace program set up for 7 years, but it will be short-lived. Russia ruins it. During this battle, the Antichrist comes to the end. And you read over there in Daniel 11. Turns me to Daniel 11, verse 45. Daniel 11, verse 45. "And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountains. yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. He's talking about the end. The Antichrist actually dies. Revelation 13 verse 3 says, of his deadly wound he was healed, and all the world wondered or marveled after the beast. In other words, the Antichrist is resurrected. Now there's a lot of theories on that. Did he really die? Did he go into a coma? I don't know. I believe that he actually dies, and through the power of Satan, or he's put in some kind of stasis. This is where this the body appears dead, and then he's resurrected. It may not even be a real resurrection, but it may be so falsified, this miracle may be so false, that many people marvel or wonder over it. But he comes back to life, quote unquote, and everyone marvels after him, literally standing in awe of his great political prowess, his enormous ability to move the minds and hearts of people globally. To the world, he appears to be like Jesus. Like Jesus. Like Jesus. There's nothing wrong with your tape. You heard me repeat it 3 times. Returning to life. And it's at this point he magnifies himself above God. Daniel 11:36 exalts himself above all gods to a deluded and a deceived world. 2 Thessalonians 2:4, and he literally says, I am God. Today, as you watch an acceleration of the New Age movement, what does the New Age movement say? You don't need God. God is within you. You have the power to heal yourself. Why bring God into the picture? You see, channeling, they talk about channeling, and by the way, if you study channeling, and I teach on New Age, if you study channeling, that was a term that originally was quoted in the New Age circles to mean communicating with aliens. And the idea of aliens coming to Earth, there's a reason for that. There's a reason New Agers are pushing that. They're not pushing it because they think aliens are cute or anything of that nature, but they're pushing it because they believe in a new world order and the idea that we are not alone in the universe, and that's why NASA and others now, I understand it's going into private circles, are spending billions and billions of dollars trying to find life on other planets. Why? Why are they trying to find life on other planets? Because they're trying to get out of what God says. God never intended us to travel to other planets, never intended us to travel to the moon. You should know that by now if you study the scriptures. The stars are for signs. They're not for traveling. Earth is for the dominion of man. Read that back in Genesis. Okay, Scripture says there in Daniel 7 that he will try to change times and laws. Now, a couple of things that can possibly be. He's certainly going to change the laws. He's also going to try to change the times. Some scholars that study Hebrew believe that he will try to rearrange the 7 major feasts of Judaism to fit into his timetable. I'm not going to spend a lot of time lecturing on that because there's so much else to look at, but it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to study the 7 major feasts of Judaism, get a good conservative textbook on that, and read that and see what that says and how those fit into God's plan. Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacle, and the like such as that. So the Antichrist will establish this kingdom. It'll come forth from the revived Roman Empire, 10-nation confederacy. You know about that a little bit. We're going to talk about that throughout the book. We're going to talk about that again. So if you missed it here, you'll pick it up in another place, or you can rewind your tape. That's the good thing about taking courses by tape. You've got the test in front of you. You've got the tape in front of you. You can stop it. You can take notes. Take sermon outlines, whatever you'd like to do, and it's all right there in front of you. But he will move it from a revived Roman Empire, and it will go on a worldwide basis. We believe he will definitely come from the revived Roman Empire. Good possibility, right out of Rome itself. Some scholars think he'll come out of Spain. Other areas, some are mentioning Germany, because that's where Hitler was, who set himself up as a god. I don't know. I really believe it's going to be Rome. I really believe he's going to be Catholic. I believe there's a good possibility he will be the Pope. And we're not 100% sure. But in any case, he will most likely, very, very good probability, high probability, that he will, whatever he is, even if he is Catholic, he will use New Age theology. And verse 28, I want to wrap up the chapter. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me. My countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. Now when the dream had been explained, Daniel felt sorrow of heart, for now he began to understand what would one day happen to his people, the Jews. His dream helped him catch a glimpse of the terrible times of persecution that would fall, and he was rightly disturbed. But he understands that blessings will come. God will bless His people, and there will come a time when we will rule and reign with Christ, initially for the 1,000-year millennium, and then we go into the Battle of Armageddon, Revelation 19. All the powers, evil forces, again, that have accumulated during the tribulation period, even after Satan had been bound for 1,000 years, and then Christ will set up his unending kingdom, new heaven, new earth, and new Jerusalem. At this point, we'll conclude. I pray that God has blessed you in this study of Daniel chapter 7, and He's blessing you through these lectures. Covered a lot of material in Daniel 7. The 4 kingdoms, the 10 toes, the revived Roman Empire, the Antichrist, New Age theology, a lot of material we covered. Next time we'll be going into letter B of your outline, the vision of the ram and the rough goat, which will be chapter 8, all 27 verses. And that will be lecture 9, and it will be on this side of the tape. It will immediately follow this lecture. Lecture 8 took quite a length of time, but we've had a lot of material to cover, and I told you we would slow down. Once we reached Daniel chapter 7, we would really slow down, and I told you that. So the next tape, or the next time we meet, will be lecture 9 on this side of the tape, side 1 of tape 6. May God bless you. This is the book of Daniel. We're in chapter 8, and this is lecture number 9. If you have your outline, it's B, the vision of the ram and the rough goat. There's 2 important factors mark Daniel chapter 8 as the beginning of a new section. First, beginning with this chapter, the language returns to the Hebrew instead of the Aramaic used by Daniel from chapter 2, verse 4, through chapter 7, verse 28. Second, the change of the language from the Aramaic to the Hebrew is in keeping with the change in thought introduced in this chapter. From this point, all the way through to the end of the book of Daniel, the prophecy, even though it concerns the Gentiles, is occupied with human history as it relates to Israel. Beginning in chapter 8, Daniel's second vision concerns the empires of Persia and Greece as they relate to Israel. Under Persian government, Israelites went back to rebuild their land and their city, Jerusalem. Under Grecian domination, in particular under Antiochus Epiphanes, the city and the temple were again desolated. Alright, we're going to spend a lot of time in this chapter and in chapter 9 dealing with Antiochus Epiphanes. And by the way, the word Epiphanes means God manifest. And Antiochus Epiphanes is a type of Antichrist. In fact, this chapter and other parts relating to Antiochus Epiphanes are what's known as a double reference prophecy. I'm going to show you in this chapter and in other chapters in Daniel how what took place 175 years before the birth of Christ will again take place when the Antichrist steps on the scene. It's almost an exact facsimile of what Epiphanes did, the Antichrist will also do. So with that, let's begin. And we'll begin with reading Daniel chapter 8, verses 1 and 2. We'll begin with first two verses. We're going to cover verses 1 through 8 real quickly, but let's go with verses just 1 and 2 right now. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which first appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw, that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. 2 years had elapsed between Daniel's vision in chapter 7 and this vision. The 1st year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, that's recorded in chapter 7, verse 1, and in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar, in 8:1. Daniel had 2 years to meditate on the vision of the 4 beasts representing the 4 governments before God imparted this further knowledge to him. In verse 2, Daniel was transported in the spirit to the palace in Shushan, which was in the province by Elam, by the river Ulai. Since Persia was to succeed Babylon, the geographical location of this vision was very significant, inasmuch as Shushan was the capital of Persia. Now it's important to keep in mind 2 prominent Old Testament figures who call Persia home. Nehemiah, we read that in Nehemiah 1:1, and Esther, Nehemiah in Esther 1, verses 2 to 5, and Esther 2, verses 3 through 5. Though it appears that the events occurring in this vision will soon come to pass, that is, as Daniel is speaking them, in actuality they would not come to pass for about 200 years. Okay, verses 3 and 4. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high. But one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, and northward, and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will, and became great. The 2 horns are the dual components of the kingdom that will overthrow Babylon, that is, Media and Persia. Of the 2 horns, the higher came up last. Media would enjoy supremacy over Persia, but of the 2, Persia eventually becomes the greater power. In fact, for about 200 years, Persia expanded her empire with irresistible force. That's what it says in verse 4. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will, and became great. The 3 points of direction in verse 4, the west, the north, and the south, agree with the 3 ribs in Daniel 7, verse number 5. Daniel 7, verse 5 says, And beheld another beast, a second like a bear, and it raised up itself on the one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it, and said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. Now the ram was the national emblem of Persia, and it was stamped on Persian coins and headdresses of Roman emperors. The strength of the ram enables it to push or move other animals or kingdoms out of its way. And this ram remained great from about 700 BC to 228 BC. Okay, let's read verses 5 through 8. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came up from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler, and that word choler means extreme anger, against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. The he-goat that was preparing to overpower Persia, the ram, moved with such rapidity that its feet didn't even touch the ground. The goat represented Greece, the next kingdom in line for world domination. And the Persian kingdom fell in 334 BC when Alexander the Great conquered King Xerxes. Okay, verses 7 and 8 speak about the great horn, Greece, being very powerful, but due to Alexander's untimely death 2 years later in 332 BC, at the very youthful age of 33, Greece was divided into 4 parts, each controlled by one of his generals. Cassander controlled Macedon and Greece. Lysimachus controlled a very large chunk of Asia Minor, Thrace and Bithynia. Seleucus controlled Syria and Babylon, and Ptolemy controlled Egypt and parts of North Africa. Okay, verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. Now, this little horn arises out of one of the 4 divisions of Alexander's empire. In 175 BC, there arose from the Seleucid dynasty in Syria. Remember, I told you that Seleucus controlled Syria and Babylon. So in 175, there arose from the Seleucid side of the dynasty in Syria a man named Antiochus, and he gave himself the title Epiphanes, God manifest. Antiochus was the 8th king of the Syrian dynasty, and he reigned from 175 BC to 164 BC. Now, I believe this man was undoubtedly demon-possessed, and was possessed specifically with the demon of hatred toward the Jews. Now, I'm going to show you, and this is very important. There's going to be a lot of questions on the test concerning Antiochus Epiphanes and the relationship between him, the double reference prophecy between him and the Antichrist. And part of your graded learning activity will deal with that. So you need to understand this. This is very, very important. The liberals say that Antiochus, there was a prophecy by Daniel, and yes, Daniel did see 200 years into the future, and he saw Antiochus, but all these prophecies concerning this wicked person were fulfilled in Antiochus, and that's not true. It's a double reference prophecy. It refers, yes, to Antiochus of the Syrian dynasty, but it also refers to the Antichrist. The atrocities of Antiochus are recorded in the apocryphal book of 2 Maccabees. Now, 2 Maccabees is a book that the Roman Catholics use in their Bible, and it's not part of the true canon, but there are some very, very good historical sections in it. And though you can't preach from it as the Word of God, the canon of Scripture, you can learn from it some historical things that took place. He raided the temple in Jerusalem and sent in an army commanded by another devil, Apollonius. It was a 22,000-man army. Now, right there, you ought to see a connection. When you study the book of Revelation, there's what's known as the unholy trinity. There's Satan, there's the Antichrist, and there's the false prophet. Here, we have Satan, we have Antiochus, and we have Apollonius. Pretending peace, He did forbear till the holy day of the Sabbath, when taking the Jews keeping holy day, he commanded his men to arm themselves. And so he slew all of them that were gone to the celebrating of the Sabbath. In addition, Antiochus compelled Jews to do the following: break the Old Testament laws. B. Change the name of the temple of God to the temple of Jupiter Olympius. Absolute blasphemy. Defile the holy place with harlots. He brought prostitutes and harlots into the temple of God. D. He forbade the keeping of the Sabbath under death. E. He forced Jews to eat unclean food, specifically swine. F. He threw babies that were circumcised. You know, the Old Testament law commanded that the male child be circumcised, thus signifying that they were in a covenant with God. He commanded all male children that he found that were circumcised to be cast from a wall and smashed. G. He murdered Jews who refused to openly sin and blaspheme God. You can read about that in 2 Maccabees chapter 6. He also sacrificed a pig on the altar in the temple and scattered its blood in the Holy of Holies. Now if you turn to Daniel 8, 11, and 12, and we'll be covering that in a second, it says, Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. By him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. During his reign of terror, he killed at least, and this is a conservative figure, 100,000 Jews. Okay, verse 10. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. As a result of his military conquest, this little horn, representing Antiochus Epiphanes, is said to grow, even to the host of heaven. He's pictured as casting some of the host of the stars to the ground and stamping upon them. And the best explanation of that prophecy relates to the persecution and destruction of the people of God, with its defiance of the angelic host who are their protectors, including the power of God himself. In other words, Antiochus was coming against God's very people. You know, the Word of God says, I will bless them that bless Israel, and I will curse them that curse Israel. And Antiochus was not only cursing them and persecuting them, putting them to death, but in a sense, he was coming against God himself. And certainly the Antichrist will do exactly that. That star should signify God's holy people is not strange when we consider as a background the words that were spoken to Abraham concerning the numerical increase of the people of God being as the stars of heaven. And you can read about that in Genesis 15:5 and Genesis 22:17. And you can also read about the stars in Daniel chapter 12, verse 3, about the those that are wise are shining as the stars of heaven, where a star-like glory is held out to those who turn many to righteousness. You can also compare that with Matthew 13:43. If the world calls those men and women stars who excel one or another department of human activity, such as actors and actresses, why should not a similar statement be still more appropriate with reference to God's people? That Antiochus blasphemed God and heavenly powers, as well as persecuted the people of Israel, the people of God, is all too evident from history. And I'm reading that from Walvoord. And certainly Walvoord and most scholars understand that he attacked with tremendous viciousness. Okay, Daniel 8 verse 11. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. By him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. According to verse 11, the little horn, which is partially fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes, but will also be fulfilled by the Antichrist, magnifies himself to the prince of the host. Now you can see that in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, how pride allowed and caused Lucifer to fall. And of course you know that Satan had 5 falls. By this is meant that he exalted himself up to the point of claiming divine honor. That was brought out by his name Epiphanes, and Antiochus did that in 175 BC, and this is exactly what the Antichrist is going to do, and I'm going to show you that. Take this on faith. I'm going to show it to you in a lot of scriptures we're going to look at in this lecture. His pretensions are similarly described in Daniel chapter 7 verse 8 and Daniel 7 verse 20. Antiochus also directed his blasphemous oppositions not only against God's people, as I shared, but against God himself, claiming himself to be God. And certainly we know that at the beginning of the 3-year Great Tribulation, right in the middle of the tribulation, when the Antichrist breaks his covenant, his contract with the people of Israel, he sets himself up in the temple and declares himself to be God. Verse 12, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Verse 12 is a recapitulation of Antiochus Epiphanes' activities against God, and also the Antichrist activities against God. The statement that a host was given him apparently refers to the fact that the people of Israel were under his power with divine permission. And there is I don't have time really to teach on divine permission, but we know that specifically from the book of Job that there is a permissive realm of Satan, that God allows Satan, we don't understand this completely, permissive realms in certain areas. The phrase against the daily sacrifice can also be translated with the daily sacrifice. That is, the daily sacrifices were also in his power, and he was able to substitute heathen worship. See, when the Antichrist makes a covenant with Israel, and when the temple is rebuilt, the sacrifices will be reinstituted, and the Jews will be happy. However, when he breaks that covenant, those sacrifices will be taken away, and he will bring false sacrifices in. The result is that Antiochus has cast down the truth to the ground, that is, the truth of the law of Moses, practiced his activities, and seemingly prospered. And I told you, it will seem that the Antichrist will prosper. It will seem that way. Till we get to Revelation 19, when we know that Jesus Christ comes riding on a white horse and deals with it. Although the translation of this verse is very difficult, verse 12, conservative scholars generally interpret it to mean that the people of Israel, along with their worship, are given over to the power in 175 BC to Antiochus Epiphanes, and then concerning the Antichrist, they're given over to him. Now, you have to be real careful when you read Walvoord, even though Walvoord is a conservative commentator and a good scholar and a good man to read, and he's got a good commentary here. A lot of this he sees fulfilled in Antiochus Epiphanes, and he doesn't see it, all of it, as a double reference prophecy. So you need to be really, really careful. You need to read his commentary with scrutiny here. Now, strangely enough, Epiphanes, and we said he's a type of Antichrist, as the 8th king of the Syrian dynasty, had a threefold purpose. History tells us he had a threefold purpose, and this threefold purpose aligns perfectly with the kingdom the future Antichrist will establish. Now listen to what the 3-point purpose is. It'll probably be on the test. Number 1, it will be a religious purpose. That is, he will have a one-world religion. We talked a little bit about that already. We dealt a little bit with that in chapter 7 of Daniel, that it will be a one-world religion. Possibly, good possibility, it will be a form of the Roman Catholic Church. Right now we said the Pope does not have the power to institute that, but it may very well come. We also said it will probably have a good flavoring, so to speak, of New Age mix in there. Number 2, it will be a militarily strong power. That is, if you reject it, you'll be punished. Talks about the mark of the beast, 6:66. If you don't take that mark, you can neither buy nor sell. People will be put to death. Number 3, it will be bureaucratic and ethnic. That is, it will be a one-world government, or a new world order. Pfeiffer says that his role, the Antichrist role, will be to develop a statewide cult. A statewide cult. Now these verses, which refer to Antiochus Epiphanes, also refer to the coming Antichrist, and they are known, I told you, as a double reference prophecy. At this point, continuation of Lecture 9 will be on side 2 of this tape. Fast forward the tape and go to side 2. Fast forward and go to side 2.